Hello, everyone. Welcome to Game Junk Reviews Marvel's Spider-Man 2, recording on January 14th, 2024. My name is Frank.
My name is Sean.
And my name is Andrew.
And joining us, a very special guest, Papa Trophy II, also known as
Jay Cheel.
Welcome, Jay Cheel.
Thanks for having me, guys. Excited to talk Marvel's Spider-Man 2.
Well, we had to get you because you've been gloating. This is your first platinum trophy. Am I correct?
It is. By gloating, you mean I just sent a picture?
Yes, you had to show that Papa Plat. Had to get it out there. So I figured you love this game and you need to be on this review.
For sure. I think I love the first one, although I burned through the first one, just the story stuff. So I think I'm going to go back and pay a little more attention to the side missions on the first one.
Interesting. The side missions are more tedious in the first, which is definitely something they addressed in this one. So let's get right into the review. We will definitely spoil some game mechanics. So warning for story spoilers. We'll get into that at the end of the episode and give you a warning. But I'll be honest, some of the game mechanics might lean into story a bit, and just fair warning. I think we'll be able to do okay, but might get a little iffy at points. So Jay, why don't you lead us off? What did you think of Marvel's Spider-Man 2? You rarely beat games, so I want to get your initial impressions.
I do rarely beat games, but when I really like a game, I do beat it. Like
Red Dead Redemption 2. Yeah, I thought you might go
there. But this is the first time I've platinumed a game. And there's something just, I guess it's the combination of the swinging mechanic and the combat that is, would you call it twitchy, or is it?
I'd say it's rhythm-based combat for the most part, kind of inspired by the Arkham Batman games, where it kind of started this reaction and timing element and specific button presses. And I think they've gotten a little looser with it, but it's along those lines, I'd say.
So I find it very satisfying. I find the parrying, and I don't remember if the first one has
no
this.
Parrying in the first one.
What about the where you press the shoulder buttons and you press one of the buttons to?
Oh yeah. There's versions of that. Yep.
So using the gadgets, using the different powers, the environment I love. I think out of all of the comic book movies, Spider-Man and comic books themselves, Spider-Man is my favorite comic book character. So I like the actual character. I think Miles Morales is a great character as well. The addition of him into this game as like a secondary player, I think is great. There are some things that get a little repetitive, but I feel like I was just kind of like in the zone, in the Marvel Spider-Man 2 zone, and was going along with the story. I thought the story, I know we're not getting to story yet, but I felt the story was actually pretty good. And it was just a lot of fun. I mean, it kept me, I think the reason I platinumed it is because I wanted to keep playing, which I would imagine is the reason to platinum.
To get that flow going, always wanting to do something else. So I think the first game was really good at this, but not great. The crime missions got a little repetitive when you're trying to do everything in the game. And then Jay, I don't know if you've played the smaller game Miles Morales that released on PlayStation 5.
So I didn't finish it, but I'm going to go back to it. And part of the reason was because the first game, and I was finding this in Miles Morales, I was getting really burnt out on the stealth stuff.
Fair enough.
So walking around on, in the ceiling and just shooting people and pulling them up. And I was happy that this game had less of that. And the addition of the zip, like the web line, I thought was a good addition that kind of added some value to that.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't think I did stealth for more than a couple minutes in this game. I might start an area in stealth, but that got broken pretty quickly. And it really wasn't a requirement the same way it was in previous versions. So I feel like they finally hit their sweet spot of amount of content, combat, and I would say their overall goal designing this game was pacing and variety. That includes side missions. I think they wanted to get a lot of different things to do, and we'll get into that in a bit more detail as we go on. Sean or Huck, and who wants to go next? What did you think?
Go for it, Huck.
Okay. I, like Jay, really adore this game loop for this game. And they did improve it a lot. I think keeping the crime missions in, but basically making them optional. They obviously identified that people weren't a big fan of these like forced on crime missions, but I think still having them there to get extra XP is a great touch. And it still has that feeling of like, oh yeah, there's crimes in New York and you got to save people. I really like how they expanded the map, and not to get too far ahead, but the fast travel system is really incredible. And really, if you get tired of swinging or something's like really far away and you don't really feel like doing it, the fast travel is so quick and really, really quite a technical feat that they could pull that off. So
yeah, I agree. And I think they really did a good job of incentivizing or making fast travel a reward with like area completion unlocks fast travel in those areas. It made you do a little bit and some side mission stuff. I thought that was a really good economic idea for the game.
Yeah, and it was a nice alternative to as a nice driver to explore the areas and find the little things around there. Whereas in the previous games, I think you just had to like unlock those towers or do certain tower missions, right? So I probably did more stealth than you guys did, it sounds like. Whereas I was actively trying to stealth as many guys as I could before going into combat, only because I know there's a lot of combat in this game. So I always try to like do as little as I can before actually doing, getting seen or whatever. And also I found that I rarely, if ever, used the Miles Morales camouflage, which I almost forgot about entirely through the game, which was a big part in the Miles Morales game.
Yeah, I used it in that game, and I rarely used it here.
Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, my overall thoughts is I think this game was incredibly well paced. I don't think there was anything groundbreaking about the story, but I felt like I was always driving towards something. I was never bored, even in like the few little lulls where they don't have like a next main story mission to do. There's always a couple little things to do, and then the main story pops up. And I also thought that the set piece moments were quite memorable and quite just awesome to play and really fun. So yeah, overall, really enjoyed it and really think they have polished this game a lot in a pretty short amount of time, relatively.
Sean, let's kick it to you. Is the world full enough? Is there enough life in the city this time?
Yeah, there's a lot of life actually, and I thought it was an improvement on the previous games in that sense. But I just think they've kind of perfected it. Like the first two games. The first game I liked. I remember kind of getting stuck somewhere in the middle of Spider-Man 1 and just leaving it. And I didn't really come back to it until Miles Morales came out. And I was like, I better finish this off. And then I got into it more. Miles Morales, shorter game. I thought it was pretty solid. And then this just kind of brings it all together. And, the combat. I remember actually one thing I remember with the first Spider-Man 2, the first Spider-Man game as well.
Marvel Spider-Man?
Yes. So the thing, like the Arkham games, I don't remember the timing of this exactly, but I still had Arkham kind of in my head. So I remember the rhythm of the combat was a little different, and I kind of kept getting frustrated by that because it wasn't quite the same, and it didn't quite click for me at first. Now I feel like this has become what I wanted the Arkham series to continue to be, whereas feels like Rocksteady has kind of gone off in this other direction. But yeah, I mean, combat's great. Traversal's great. Story, I think, is amazing. And I know everybody thinks we just, are kind of suckers for the Sony first party, third person action adventure games, which we are, but they're so good. Like they just, the kind of blockbuster epic feel of them while also being incredibly playable and addictive. They just kind of nail all the points you want them to. And just I'll end with one interesting point, because you mentioned Jay getting the platinum trophy. I was thinking about it and I was like, this game, I bet completion rate of this game is a lot higher than a lot of other games, because I just think it's compelling and it makes people want to keep playing. And I looked it up. I don't know how accurate this is, but on one of the trophy guide sites, the platinum trophy is over 70%, which seems kind of crazy.
That's really high.
I thought I saw it at 17% when I looked on the actual PlayStation, but I could be wrong. I'm not a.
Yeah, I mean, you can check the platinum trophy. Once I'm done talking, I'll check it on the official PlayStation app. I think we have that data. That could have been for people who share their information and track on that particular trophy website, but I'm not sure. We'll see. We'll do some due diligence.
It was listed as a common trophy, which seems insane to me. So it could be wrong. It could definitely be wrong. But yeah,
it's not a common trophy.
Well, let's see how common it is. Who here platinumed Marvel's Spider-Man 2?
I did.
I platinumed it.
I did not.
I did not either.
By platinum, you mean get the platinum trophy 100%. You've done everything there is to do, nearly.
Well, let me just ask you.
There is something you missed, but
did you get the full stars or grades for every Mysterio mission? Like the highest grade possible?
I did.
Okay, just checking.
I did 100% of the game. Like, the map, the suits, the gadgets, all that stuff. I did not get the platinum trophy though. So I've definitely experienced the game.
So, Sean, you crushed us in the annual wrap-up last year. How do you compare in terms of your Marvel Spider-Man 2 stats?
No plat. I believe it says 70% on the main screen, whatever that means. So, I mean, I did a bunch of the side quests, but I don't know. Like, I could see myself going back to it, but I do have a problem where as soon as I roll credits on a game, my mind is, I'm done. I'm out. I want to play something else. So
see, that's the opposite of me. As soon as the credits roll, I'm like, okay, now the game begins.
Hey, I mean, some games do get better in that kind of end game scenario. So
many do. So I guess I liked the game the least out of everyone here, but I still really liked it. And I guess my kind of metric for that is when I first purchased it and started it, at some point I was like, okay, I feel like I've played this before and it wasn't something that I needed to finish, which is usually the case for those AAA PlayStation games. And Sean, you're correct. People love those games because they are the best games made nowadays. Magazines, websites like IGN might say is that a problem that Sony's too fixated on AAA games? I don't think it's a problem. I think it's a problem that other studios aren't concerned with making games of this quality. But I think part of it takes a while to get ramped up. And most of the really compelling stuff for me happened in the last half of the story. So the longer I played it, the more I got into it and I wanted to do more side missions. Speaking of which, so I guess on a plus and negative side with the side missions, I like the idea of the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man missions, which is a set. And there's I don't know what the official term is for like the science missions. I like the concept, but I did not find those missions to be fun necessarily. And I wish they were, I like the change up, the pace. I just wish they could have been a bit more exciting. And I felt like the design of some of those missions was frustrating at times. I had to shoot out a wooden plank from a pigeon cage, and I had no idea what to do. There were a few times doing those missions I had to look up, like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. And I think that's a failure of the game, not of me.
I did not have to look anything up.
Okay, that's
I
fine.
also did not have to look anything up. Ooh.
Can I ask?
I'm not
Isn't it,
embarrassed.
Frank?
I'm not embarrassed one bit about that. It was poor design.
When in the past, when you've talked about trophy guides, are you talking about the thing on the PlayStation?
No,
That
there are websites that give you a roadmap of getting a platinum, and just to watch out for missing stuff or easily missable trophies, so you don't have to play the whole game again to get it, or some collectibles guidance.
So did you use a guide for this?
No.
Okay.
I won't use a guide if you can go back and 100% everything later. I would never use a guide. It's only for watching out for those small things that if you don't do it, you're basically gonna have to play the whole game again. I'm not like looking every 5 seconds I play to see what to do next in a trophy guide. Just tell you the truth. Now, the things that I think are really big successes for this game, Huck mentioned fast travel and switching characters. I think that works really well. I established quite a while ago that I think the new trend in video games is going to be multiple main player characters, and it seems to be going that way pretty hard with every game this year, especially the big games of this year. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a really good thing. It helps create pace and variety. I'd say the downside with this one is they play pretty similar. There's not a huge difference between them, so I enjoy playing as both. But if I think of God of War, the multiple characters in that, it was fun and really unique when I got to play as a different character. That being said, the Mary Jane portions of this game, which I found to be pretty slow and boring in the first Marvel Spider-Man, I thought they did a great job with this. They made stealth fun, and specifically, they made it fast. Often stealth is so slow paced and you're just waiting for stuff to happen. They gave the player the agency to stun, move quickly, not be worried about getting caught all the time. They made it an aggressive stealth mode, and you don't do it that often, but I thought it worked extremely well. I thought those missions were fun, and it evolves into something completely different in the climax of the game, which maybe I'll say for spoilers, that I thought was great. Really good. And for obvious reasons for people who know me, including Jay, which we'll get to in spoiler. But I thought there were some other like big set pieces where the controls changed quite a bit that I thought were fantastic. We've talked about this on our initial impressions. Visually, the open world it still looks great, but any interior section and the visuals towards the end of the game, including interior ones, were absolutely mind-blowing. Of course, I have to mention the balloons again in the school sequence, which blew my mind, still do. But there's some stuff involving Venom, or what do you call the symbiote stuff that looks fantastic in the last half of the game. So visually great. Gameplay, I was starting to get a little burnt out, but I think the testament of the game is the pacing and variety, and I just wanted to keep going. Let's go get the next thing, clear out this area, and I think the collectibles are actually great. I know, Jay, I think we talked, you weren't a fan of the ones toward the ends with the drone where you have to follow them through the slipstream.
Yeah, I think a big part of that was because I left a lot of that until late in the game. And it becomes harder for reasons that we won't get into, but it was less frustrating when I continued playing.
Okay. See, I guess that's a thing we should definitely talk about. The websuit, I would say, is the major locomotion traversal addition to this game. And I thought I was going to love it. And it was a real slow burn with me. And I think part of that is they expanded the city quite a bit. So I was a little unsure about that because we always like the smaller open worlds, like Arkham City and the original Spider-Man was a nice size. But because of the websuit and fast travel, the size wasn't a burden or an annoyance to me in this game. I thought it was quite well done, and it's not that much bigger, to be honest. So by the end, I was kind of sold on the websuit, but only if I'm using the vents or the air currents in the city and doing the drone missions. When it could run out quickly, I was not compelled to use it very often, to be honest. So that was not a huge success for me. How did you guys feel about the websuit? Did you use it a lot or minimally?
I used it quite a bit. I found as soon as I discovered that you can zip line while using it to kind of keep your momentum a little more, I used it a lot more. And I found that there was enough of those little like air tunnels that you could boost through, and also the ones that would fly you up higher to keep you going like a pretty good distance without having to either switch to web swinging or, hit the ground or whatever.
Actually, let me add one thing. The big game changer for the websuit for me was powers you get later on through the skill tree, where you can do a mid-air dash and elevate yourself again while swinging or websuiting. That allowed you to gain elevation really quickly. Once that was added, I used it way more and I loved it.
It's funny. I don't think I ever used that power after I got it, to tell you the truth.
I left a lot of the traversal skills to the end, which maybe was a mistake, but I like the wingsuit. I used it a lot. Like
Sorry, is it wingsuit or websuit? Just, I don't know if I'm embarrassed or Sean's embarrassed. I legit don't know.
I think it's a wingsuit.
Okay.
Because it has wings, but
fair enough. Yeah. I'm embarrassed.
Okay. Like it's, I find when you are swinging through the city, obviously, there's obstacles that come up. You can hit walls and things. And so just sometimes when you're just really wanting to go from point A to B in a straight line, it was nice for that. But yeah, I found everything chained together really nicely. And, the only hard thing is sometimes if you're trying to hit a specific point that you overshoot it and come back, but whatever.
I had a few things, and this could be me, but I've found that when trying to finish the drone things in the period that I was saying was a little more frustrating, I was often sticking to walls when I didn't want to be sticking to walls, and my wings sometimes disengaged seemingly out of nowhere. I would imagine it must be something I was doing, but I didn't feel like I was doing anything to disengage it. So that was kind of frustrating. But
those drone missions are definitely among the most frustrating things in the game, I would say.
Yeah, I think once you kind of, I felt like I had to do them a couple, like one or two at a time, because I would manage to get one done. The next one I might have a little more trouble with. And if I tried a third one immediately, it's almost like I got burnt out on it or something. So I left a lot of them to the end because I was, frustrated, but I don't think that was a good strategy anyways. But
I think that's something interesting to talk about. The game doles out when you get certain collectibles, and some or like other missions, side missions, like the drone with the wingsuit, you don't get until very late in the game. So if you've focused on other collectibles, then you have to do all of those at the same time. And it doesn't give you the opportunity to pace it out yourself. So I could see certain ideas relating to collectibles and extra gameplay, depending on the order you tackle them, being a little repetitive or boring. So I'm sure they had internal discussions about, how soon do we open up these things in the game? And I sometimes, excuse me, sometimes I think they would have been better off unlocking more earlier, just so I could dictate my own pace and variety level I want to achieve.
Yeah, I found that when I got to the point where, so I this isn't spoiler, but there's a point where it kind of gives you a warning that this is the last chance you'll have to upgrade stuff or whatever. I kept going back and trying to finish things. And because I'm not someone who like platinums things or rarely finishes games, I found it a little confusing because there were things that weren't on the map anymore that were there previously. And I assumed it was for story reasons. But I wasn't sure if it was just not on the map anymore, but still there. And if you had to find it without it being on the map, or what the deal was with that.
I think there were some bugs.
Well, I had confusion with that too, where Jay's saying there's a big story moment towards the end of the game, which I think is inspired by Arkham Knight, which also did something similar, that it actually removes stuff from the map because I wasn't complete yet. And I was also a little confused with some of that stuff, but it wasn't a deal breaker for me.
And there is a point at which around that point, everything gets very quiet because there's no more cell phones going off. There's, the podcasts or whatever aren't coming through. So there was a period there where it felt like, okay, the game is now, I've juiced it to the extent that it can be juiced. And all I'm doing is swinging around and, fighting bad guys in these little, not even the side missions, just the crimes that you see pop up everywhere, which gave me, I guess, kind of made me realize when the like proper story element of the game is playing out, it does feel pretty alive when you're getting texts from people and you're, it feels like you're active and you're having to go here and having to go there. And eventually it kind of had me thinking like the control of like the agency of the player to be able to finish things in whatever order they want definitely affects story, because at least your magic circle of the story or whatever, because at some point it's like you're doing some things that are kind of in conflict with what is happening in the story.
Exploration conflicts with the urgency of what might be happening in the story. If you're actively choosing when someone's in danger to go do a Mysterio mission or something like that. But that's every game, really.
Yeah.
I do like that about these games, though. Like, I find that they, sometimes open world games are overwhelming, right? And I've certainly found that it can be a turnoff when there's too many things coming at you, like, come over here, do this. Oh, hi, come talk to me, and you're just like, okay, I want to concentrate on one thing. But it kind of like thematically, certainly that's Spider-Man, right? Like, he's being pulled in a million different directions. So the game does that, but I never really felt super stressed about it. Like, it was kind of, you'd see maybe some things pop up on the map or whatever, but it wasn't like super in your face. Like, you kind of could still pick and choose what you wanted to concentrate on. So I thought that was pretty well done.
Yeah. Speaking of all the side missions, and I will say, even though I found some of the side missions like design like a little confusing, most of that stems out of them wanting variety. So every mission was a little different. They didn't want repetition. So I'll take the variety and pacing over, they're perfectly designed and I never have questions as to what to do anytime, rather than just getting bored of doing the same thing over and over again, like Ghost of Tsushima. Like that was so repetitious. I'll take this version any day of the week. And while we're talking about that, I think one of the bigger criticisms of all open world games, including the first Marvel Spider-Man, is repetition and getting bored and burnout on getting 100%. And Miles Morales did this a bit better, but almost because it's smaller. It was smaller by design. It was a really short game. It was trying to fit into the PlayStation 5 launch window. So I didn't really know where they were going to go with this one. And it pretty much ends up somewhere in between, but you can tell internally they were like, we need variety, as much variety as possible in the side missions. And I think so. Fundamentals of Game Design by Ernest Adams talks about this idea of a gameplay mode. this isn't, multiplayer versus single player.
I'm Big Frankie.
I did not want to pretend like this was my idea. And how it's described is a combination of camera and controls, a different way of playing the game. So, walking around as Link versus aiming a bow as Link. And in the first 4 hours of this game, it was introducing a new gameplay mode like every 10 minutes, whether it's the drones, like shoot that little mini game with the spider where you shoot things. Then there's the spider drone where you go into vents and you kind of hack things. And they're like mini puzzle sections. And then countless more, including all the way up to the websuit drone stuff at the end. It just kept introducing new ideas constantly. And I think that was the internal direction, or variety would have been a core pillar for this game, I think. And they absolutely crushed it with that stuff. And it's easy to add variety. It's not easy to make every one of those gameplay modes feel good and be fun. And for the most part, I think they crushed it.
And on that note, like each of those specific things they added, they only use them a handful of times. It's kind of like a Nintendo style of
totally.
We're gonna give you this brand new suit, and you're only gonna play it in 2 levels, and that's good enough. Like, we don't need to overkill you with this thing. And I felt like they did that in this game. There were so many, like you were just saying, Frank, so many little mini games that they had. Like even some of the change of pace ones, like the what are they called? The EMF experiments.
Yeah, I mean, one of those missions I found particularly bad. We can talk about it.
Okay. But I mean, like, that was one of the things I remember people were complaining about that I personally liked from the first Spider-Man. It was like all the little Peter Parker, like electronics experiments and DNA spectrometer, whatever.
I forgot.
Those things.
Sorry. Yeah, I forgot.
People hated those things, but I liked them. And I feel like they kept them in here, but changed them up and also didn't have them be too in your face and also not too difficult. They're all pretty easy. Nothing's going to stump you in a big puzzle or anything like that.
Yeah, that's kind of Insomniac's bag, really, going all the way back to Ratchet and Clank. Clank would have his own puzzle system. They'd have hacking things that were mini games on basically a menu screen. And this has the molecule shooting, building different compounds, all that stuff I loved. I thought those were nice changes of pace, and they didn't get overused. The one mission I found super annoying was rotating the mirrors with those beams at the school. That's like a really that's the first big side mission I did. The first time you get an incoming call, and it was like helping some guy ask someone out, I think. I don't remember exactly. Yeah. And try to be school president. There's like a series of missions at that school. And that one is that was the worst one. That set was the worst out of all of them. So I'm surprised they led with that one in the game. I found that one the most frustrating.
It's funny because I did that like post credits.
Really? Yeah. Mm. I think that's the first call you get, though. It introduces the idea of non-mandatory missions, and I think the first one of those is the first one you do, but I could be wrong.
It comes up early on, because I remember that being one of the things, that and the music mission were two things that were they were what's that?
Oh no, sorry, where you get all the instruments that are stolen and stuff like that.
Yeah, those were things that I remembered coming up, and then suddenly they were gone from the map. But I was able to obviously finish them afterwards. But yeah, I don't disagree. The mirror one was a little, I don't know. It was kind of tough. I didn't quite understand what the purple mirror versus, like, I eventually got it, but it was like, okay, are we splitting things?
Well, that's the dilemma, right? So when you have so many different types of side missions in the interest of variety, then they have to be different enough that there might be a lack of transference of knowledge from other things in the game. So you're relearning or learning for the first time some ideas in the context of this mission. And that's where my confusion usually came from. It was something I haven't had to do in the game before, and the game didn't really teach me. They were just like, well, they'll figure it out eventually, kind of thing. But there were a few moments where I'm like, I literally have no idea what I'm supposed to do. And I had to either look it up or restart a checkpoint. It was usually kind of hinted at in a cutscene or a dialogue thing. And I usually zone out for that stuff anyway. So,
Well, they didn't have the God of War kind of like spelling out the solution 20 seconds later issue. So I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah, it does feel like you can kind of encourage that a little bit with the R3 button, that if you're not getting it, I didn't feel like it was too quick to be like, oh, maybe you should try this. But if I kept, pressing that button, it was helping guide me towards certain things.
In those missions where I had issues, the R3 really didn't tell you anything. It just like scanned the area and nothing showed up. I found the stashes, the Prowler stashes, to be kind of hit and miss. This is a good example of one of those. All of a sudden, it has these boxes that you have to give electrical current to, and it doesn't really tell you it's a timed thing, or how that you can do that from a distance, or how close you have to be. Or in the previous game, I think you could shoot electricity to conduct current, and you couldn't do that anymore. There was a timed one of those that I found extremely frustrating.
There was like an audio cue to mention it, but you may have missed that.
No, I knew I had to use my electric smash or whatever that is. I just didn't know where I needed to stand or how far away I could be. And it just, by iteration and failing over and over again, I'm like, I guess I can do this from further away than I think I can. I don't have to be right beside it. But I don't think the game establishes that all that well.
Yeah, I remember that one being a little unintuitive. But I did like the Prowler ones in general, because it just was a little bit of environmental puzzle exploration stuff.
I love the mini game for the Prowler stuff mostly, where you have to use the DualSense haptic triggers to keep it in a zone for a certain amount of time with the right pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They use that in a few other spots as well.
Yeah.
And then like going off the mini games too, like that whole carnival scene where they have all these one-off games where you're like shooting water at a target or throwing the ball. The basketball one comes up a couple spots, but it just seems from a game development perspective, you're just spending all this time to create this mechanic that you only use one time is pretty remarkable that, they would spend the time. I don't know if it was like, a bunch of people were done already, so they just decided to screw around and see what they could come up with. And this was the stuff they came up with and they incorporated it, but it seems unlikely that would have been the case. Maybe in a couple of them, but I don't know. It blows my mind that they can spend so much money and time for a thing they only use one time. I mean, I think it's great. It really makes it memorable. I find Final Fantasy does this too, where they create these whole set piece moments that you only see once that could be reused. You could do it 100 times, but they don't. And I think that's what makes it memorable. So I think it takes a lot of not like guts basically to do that and just say, nope, we're only going to do this once. Maybe it costs us, $10,000,
but we're only time and money helps as well.
Yeah. Sure. And it's this is the third game, so they're building on an engine where they've got the system kind of down. But that Coney Island stuff that's where the game really started to click for me. Like the first couple hours, I was like, okay, it's good, but it feels kind of like the same. But once, started getting into that, I just found the main story stuff started introducing just cool scenarios for every mission. And I was really kind of getting into it after that.
I really like the cheering mechanic in Coney Island where you're just did
you just spam it?
Yeah.
I know I just spammed it.
I like the idea of the Coney Island mission, but for someone who's obsessive like I am and I had to do everything on the map, I found some of them to be a little underwhelming. But another idea of using an idea sparingly, to great impact is the bicycle stuff. You know, you do it in a story mission early. I'm like, this is kind of fun. I like the
You
idea
mean
of
like
bike.
great impact as in frustrating?
No, I
Or
like the
fun?
bike stuff. Like
Oh,
just
really? Oh,
and then you had to do a side mission with the bike, and that one was frustrating for me. But
that's the one I'm thinking of. Not the
okay.
initial one with Harry.
Yeah,
But that side mission through the park, that one was annoying.
But I did the bike, and I'm like, I wonder if you're going to do that again at all in the game. And I did one side mission, and I didn't love it. I thought it was okay. I'm like, oh, am I going to have to do 10 of these? And no, it was just those two. Perfect. They have a really good sense, probably through play testing and amount of time they can allocate and resources for play testing, that I think the stuff that's good, you do the best, you do the most of, and it just scales down from there. And they're really good at identifying what's fun and how much to put it in the game. It's quite amazing. Between Insomniac and Naughty Dog, they are like the best at pacing. Naughty Dog is number one, although I think Insomniac is pacing them now. And I loved Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. I don't think enough people played that game. That game, I don't think sold that well, and that might have been part of the leaks that I don't know. I doubt we're going to get to in the review, but that game deserves way more attention, and people should be platinuming that one.
Yeah, I did hear that. I assume it was from the leaks, but
Yeah.
Oh, and this is mild spoiler, but one of the side missions uses the tech from, remember how you could create a rift and teleport across the level?
Yeah.
Use that tech in a side mission here, which was pretty neat.
Yeah, there's
And only
one
use
moment
one time.
that's pretty amazing during that.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's spoiler, but
I would like to talk about the economy of the game and how you get the different types of tokens to unlock your stuff. I thought it was actually really well done. And I originally started like unlocking some suits, and then, they also added, related to the economy, they added like an upgrade path for your health, your damage, your focus, your spider focus or whatever, and
Those were in
traversal.
that was in the first game.
Were they?
For sure. Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
I know they had like the skill tree, but I didn't think they had an upgrade path for skills.
Maybe not. I thought I will say the menus for that and for upgrading your gadgets are really similar looking. So maybe I'm using those.
Okay, well maybe it's not new, but I thought the way that unlocked, and once I kind of like was looking at that and trying to analyze like, okay, how many points do I need for what? I like how they show everything, the costs ahead of time. Like you could preview everything and see how much it's going to cost and kind of plan your way out, because there's 3 types of tokens you could use for upgrading of different values essentially. And once I got to a couple of those Mysterio ones where you had to like defeat the guys in a certain amount of time, I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to do these until my damage is maxed out. So I was wait to do those. But I actually thought that you could gain tokens through your normal missions, but then they also have these boxes strewn all over the city that you can just pick up when you come across them that give you more of the tokens that allow you to unlock these things more. And I thought that was a really low stress way to be able to unlock stuff. You're not, calculating, okay, how do I need, I think there's like a lot of extra stuff in this game. It wasn't so strictly balanced where like you have to find everything to unlock everything. You could probably find 50% of those boxes and have plenty of tokens to unlock everything, which I thought was pretty nice. I don't like those games where I'm like Assassin's Creed, those stupid feathers, where I'm like, okay, now I gotta find the last feather in this massive open world to finish this game. This seems ridiculous. So I thought they did a really good job of balancing that. I found I was, in terms of the skill tree economy and where I was putting my level up points, I was always favoring the individual character upgrade paths versus the combined path. I don't know if you guys did one or the other. I know you guys were talking about upgrading the wingsuit. I don't think I got to that until like the very end. But I always favored the individual Miles tree or the individual Spider-Man
I always
tree.
favored a power on the L1 button first, if I could unlock a new extra power, and then always shared something that both characters could use.
Yeah, usually shared for me as well. But
And talking
I
about
mean,
unlocking things, I would just say I usually don't care about outfits and suits in games, but in these Spider-Man games, they have really cool suits and variants, and I actually do experiment with them and play as like the character looking different. Both characters had awesome suits, so that's pretty rare. So I think they're doing a really good job with unique looks with those extra suits.
yeah, I agree. I don't care about cosmetics most of the time, but all those suits were really cool, and obviously bringing in like the Spider-Verse stuff was great. And yeah, it was just
Or I could have cared less what I don't know why you have to do all this like hilts and every part of the character is customizable. And I was just like, give me the strongest thing. I don't care what I look like. But in this game, I do care.
yeah. But I mean, just in terms of like the leveling up and stuff too, like it felt to me like almost every mission you finished, you got something, like whether you were leveling up and you got a skill point, or maybe you unlocked the fast travel for that neighborhood. Like it was always feeling like you were accomplishing and getting rewarded in some way, which is way more than a lot of other games. Like a lot of times you feel like you got to grind to get to that next level, but in this one, it's like you're always getting something, which is, a great feeling.
As someone who doesn't track like upgrading stuff in games, I did find myself at one point with like a backlog of unused points, and that felt really good, going in there and being like, oh, I can immediately unlock like 15 suits, or like Frank was saying, or Andrew was saying, the skill tree for the Spider-Man and Miles, I didn't hardly touched. And by the time I got to it, I could nearly fill it in one go. But I did like how the power of the character changes in a very noticeable way throughout the game, in one big story way that I thought was immediately satisfying, like the feeling of having a bump in power that relates to story, and that in combination with the haptic feedback, I thought was pretty successful.
Yeah, and it comes at a good point where it's like totally switches up the attacks and everything feels fresh again. So yeah, it works really well.
Related to the special attacks or whatever was on kind of your L1, I found that kind of with the gadgets too, I wasn't using those strategically ever. I was kind of just always mashing whatever was available if I was in like a big fight. Did you guys find you were using those abilities because you actually knew what they were and were strategically using them, or did you just mash away like I did?
I'm a bit of a masher, and I'm usually not. And I if this is my one thing that the first game did better, I thought the use of gadgets in the first was better. And then they had missions where you had to use two things in combination to teach you how you can use a gadget plus a certain move to do certain things. I didn't think it was bad, but I'll be perfectly honest. Up until the end of the game, I would still confuse L1 and R1 with gadgets and powers.
Yeah, same.
I don't know why. It's very strange, but I did until I literally the last mission. I was still pressing the wrong one.
Well, I was looking back at the Spider-Man 1, and they have that like radio wheel where you pick all your gadgets.
I kind of prefer that.
Yeah.
I felt like I was kind of in control of everything I was doing, which normally I'm not. I would say I'm a masher, but for whatever reason, I really, I guess, caught on to that way of mapping moves. And in terms of using them strategically, I think the only thing I used strategically was the gadget that pulls everyone together. So you pull them all together and then do some, like the double R2, R1 or whatever. You know what I'm talking about? That was the only thing that I used strategically, but otherwise, I mean, it didn't feel, I felt like I was controlling what I was doing though.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely like a lot of abilities and attacks that I didn't use though. And I mean, that's always an issue with these games. Like they give you a lot of stuff to unlock. You find a few things you like, you usually stick to those. But if you want to experiment, it's there.
Yeah, I find in all three games, I use it, but I don't love air combat. I feel like it gets a little, it's just mashing a button once I'm in the air. Do you guys find you use the powers once you're in the air, or do you just mash square?
I use the powers.
I just mash square. I find my whole gameplay is basically around hitting up the first guy, beating him up, then pulling another guy up to me and just hanging out in the air so no one else can get to me, and then avoiding rifle shots or whatever ranged attacks as they happen. And I sort of felt like I was cheating the game at a certain point because I was just kind of sitting in the air so long. But I do still love, hitting a guy up and then just kicking him off a building and then forgetting about him. That's always pretty fun to do.
The dodging since the first game was great. It's still great. It's very satisfying to execute a perfect dodge. Even the one where you go between legs is extremely satisfying. I did not like parrying in this game. I rarely parried, and I found the timing to be quite frustrating, especially comparing it to God of War and those circles, timing circles. I thought I loved all the timing circle elements of God of War Ragnarok. I thought the parrying system was kind of bad.
I usually hate parrying. I didn't mind it in this game, but like generally if it didn't work, it was because I was kind of already locked into an animation, and I kind of felt like it was okay. It's kind of my fault because I, did one hit too many and I should have waited. But I mean, it wasn't perfect for sure.
I think there were times where I like kind of got confused as to which ones you are supposed to parry, which ones you're supposed to dodge. But eventually I just found that knowing that someone is about to do an attack that you can parry, I would just hit the button.
You
like
mashed
hold my
it?
controller right here and just do this.
Which is not great. That's
Past lives
a
reference.
flawed design.
I mean,
Yeah, if you're parrying is supposed to be about timing, not about spamming a button.
But isn't it about encouraging you to go to that specific button
No, I
for
think
that moment?
parrying is ultimately the timing mechanic. It's rewarding the risk of perfect timing with power and damage. It's a risk reward timed button press. And if you didn't even have to worry about the risk, that's
It's one of my favorite things in the whole game. I don't know what to tell you, but
what difficulty do people play on?
whatever the standard.
Okay, me too.
Yeah.
I know
Amazing.
sometimes you go to story difficulties in games, Jay. I didn't know if you did that with this.
That what? Sorry?
Like sometimes you play like the story when they say this is the difficulty. People who like story. Because I thought maybe they might have tweaked the parry difficulty. But maybe
No,
you're just a gamer, bud. You got the skills.
Well, I mean, when I'm fighting people in this game, you guys are talking about mashing. For me, it was like a ballet. It was just every move I felt like I was in control of. And sometimes a fight ended and I felt like that I got the job done, but I got it done beautifully. Like it was something to, if I had a friend and they wanted to come here and watch me play, they would be entertained.
Jay Cheel!
Absolutely.
What about, can you give yourself a hero drop there? I didn't even think like this is a Spider-Man review, and that hero drop is Spider-Man related. You should be using way more.
I'm not gonna stand here and wait.
All right,
Video gamers.
I think there's a big thing we haven't touched on yet, and bosses. Pretty major in previous iterations of this game. I don't know about you guys, but I felt like all the bosses were stacked to the second half of the game. There weren't a lot of boss fights in the first half. There's the Sandman encounter at the beginning of the game, which I thought was good, not necessarily great. But I was like, are there going to be any bosses here? To the point where when you do the Mysterio missions and there's a boss fight at the end of that, I thought that boss fight was awesome. Just like not so much the gameplay, but the scale and setting for that boss fight, I loved. But towards the end, it starts to pack the boss fights in pretty intensely, which makes for a pretty epic conclusion to the game.
Yeah, some of them are pretty challenging too. I also like that in each of it wasn't necessarily like just boss fights, but kind of going back to the parry thing. Like if you missed a parry, it would remind you like, oh, you have to parry that or kind of like jump and dodge away from it or something like that. And it never, I like that little hint system there where it doesn't punish you for forgetting how the mechanic works or whatever. But I did find that most of the boss fights were, kind of similar in nature, but they were spectacle moments with like little additions here and there. But overall, I would say the boss fights didn't wow me. There was a couple like long intros, I would say, into boss fights that were really fun to do. One involved kind of like, let's say like kind of like water skiing, let's say, to not spoil it, though. I don't know. That might have been shown in some trailers. But there's definitely a couple near the end that are quite challenging, and I thought they were fun, but didn't wow me with anything new, let's say.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because one thing all three games do really well, including this one, is like using Spidey powers in quick time cutscene scenarios where it's like a big story moment and you have to use your powers, and they come up with some uses of spider powers that are on par with Spider-Man movies. I think they're filmed really well in the cutscenes, and like geography of the scenes is actually really well done for a video game in terms of doing action film type stuff in cutscenes. It's great at it. The idea that the big villain that's been advertised in all the marketing is Kraven. I would say Kraven ultimately, and that boss fight was not all that exciting to me. I know by the end it's kind of the B villain, but I wasn't that intrigued by that character. And maybe because that's what's holding the first half of the game together. And like, I was less interested in the first half and way more invested in the second half of the game.
I would say more than half. I'd say almost like 3/4 of the game
Maybe, yeah,
was around him.
Yeah,
feel like they were.
Go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, it did feel like they were missing a couple of the like big headliner villains. I don't remember all the villains that were in the first Spider-Man game. Maybe that's why. Just they had a lot in the first one, and they didn't want to repeat. But that was probably my only real complaint. Is it just felt like, there's a couple big ones, and then there's some that are like just smaller. Some that are like just new creations, I guess. Well, maybe they're not. I don't actually know, but that was probably my main disappointment with it.
I liked the with the boss fights where you have to use the environment to stun people, which I know isn't like a new concept, but just with the web mechanics, I felt like it was pretty satisfying when you could pull off certain like opening vents or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Just an observation. I use my web shooters way less in this game than I did in previous ones. I used to really like peppering that R1 button and then slamming people to stick to walls. I barely did that in this game. I'm not sure if that's a calculated thing or a me thing. Like they were trying to make that less, I wouldn't say it's overpowered, but maybe not that interesting.
Well,
I started
they specifically say for the symbiote to do that, right? That symbiotes are like webs are their weakness.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
So it suggests webbing them up, and that's another gadget that I would use strategically, is the Sonic gadget.
Yeah,
the
towards the
symbiotes.
end. Yeah, it definitely has way more impact, that gadget, towards the end of the game for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I did want to just go back to the quick time event thing that you mentioned, Frank, because I find it interesting. Like, Sony still like there's something about QuickTime events that feels almost old fashioned now. Like it was a thing like what, early 2000s maybe, or somewhere around there where it started to, everybody was using them.
I feel
And
like
then,
the first God of War,
yeah,
it really kickstarted it.
yeah. And then it feels like a lot of people kind of thought they were just dumb and they got tired of them, but Sony's still using them. And I think they work for what they're doing, because it's kind of a way to have everything really cinematic and epic, but still you're a little bit involved and you got to pay attention to the cutscenes and stuff. So it works for me. I'm curious, I guess, what you guys think, or what.
QuickTime events are really good when you can mirror them to the game's controls. So you instinctively press the right button in those things. So as long as you have a lot of buttons to use in QuickTime and it's not just random button presses, you know, it helps reinforce ideas and controls. It's especially effective for tutorial sequences. Jedi, Fallen Order, and Survivor do this really well, where they teach you force pull by grabbing your lightsaber in a QuickTime event the first time. So when you can use those for teaching and for reinforcing powers, I think it's really good. And when it makes you like pepper the propeller, I don't know why I keep saying pepper, with the web shooters to stop it from spinning, like those are great uses of QuickTime events. And I'm pro QuickTime events as long as it's not constant. If it's used sparingly, I think it can be really effective.
I'll say I went back to the first Spider-Man after finishing this one and did the first little section, and there were way more in the first one, and it felt like it was like it was more obvious that you were not in control of anything. I almost feel like maybe playing some of the stuff, there's like that feeling of when a cutscene is playing. Sometimes I think, why am I not playing this? I would like to be playing this. But the limitations of the gameplay, if you want to have a super cinematic cutscene, sometimes I guess it just doesn't map onto, or gameplay doesn't map onto it. So turning it into a QuickTime event can be a solution to that. But then I also feel like it just points out the fact that they couldn't really map anything to it. It's giving you the impression that you're engaged and affecting things. I think in this one, in the balance of like having QuickTime events, but then also having scenes just play out, I was okay with that. I was okay with having a scene play out without like a square button coming up to, hit it to make it seem like I'm still playing. And I feel like that, I don't know that this game necessarily has this, but anytime there's something where, like say walking a beam where you have to balance, it feels like there's nothing to that. Like you could walk it and not try to balance at all, and you would probably still get across. I think those are the things that I find more egregious, where it's like giving you the impression in the game that you're doing something that actually has consequences, but it really doesn't, or it would take a lot for it to have a consequence.
Yeah, balancing is an interesting one because it never feels fair. There's no way where you can get good enough to cross beams that you'll never lose your balance. It's designed so that, well, you're going to lose your balance at some point, and it's not about walking with balance. It's about recovering from getting unbalanced. And it feels a little more frustrating than, hey, can you walk across this while balancing? Some games have tried to do it with like 6-axis stuff and actually make it a skill, but no one's ever done that really well at all. But there were definitely cinematics in this game where I think one time I even reflexively hit a button, assuming it was going to be a QuickTime event, and a few times where I thought that should have been a QuickTime event.
Interesting. Very interesting. One thing with the Coney Island stuff, did you guys use the motion or the buttons, or a combination of the two? Like raising the hands, you could
only use the thing, right? I think I experimented with both just to see what it was like, but mostly the controller buttons.
Same, yeah.
You didn't, for the hitting the gophers, do this?
Oh. Was that an option?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I knew that some of those had that option, because that sounds really cool.
It's pretty sweet.
Maybe we could talk graphics a little bit. I know I said I didn't think it was. Interiors were amazing, exteriors okay. The last thing I would mention is character models were really hit and miss for me. Like Mary Jane, I didn't think looked very good. Peter Parker, I thought also the new version of Peter Parker does not blow me away. Harry, I thought looked really good. And there was Norman Osborn, I thought was a pretty solid character model. It really was hit and miss. I was like, it was either amazing or garbage for me. But character models and other elements, how did you guys feel about the graphics?
Well, I guess one question is, what did you guys play in, performance or fidelity?
I don't remember what I
I think I
chose.
played performance.
I think I did
Whatever
too.
the default is. I didn't even check
I
that.
played fidelity.
I mean, I thought the city looked amazing. Like there was, a lot of photo mode coming out, and just like, I want to take a picture of this. It looks cool.
You
So
just took photos?
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. I mean, I
Never
just
wanted to take a photo in a game unless it was something weird or
well, yeah, it doesn't happen too often. But I mean, this game obviously gives you some tools to mess around with that. But yeah, but I agree that some of the character models are a little weird. Don't really understand why. I guess maybe it's just a subjective thing. I'm not sure.
Again, I went back to the first Spider-Man, and it's the remastered version, and the character model for Kingpin is I found to be way better than any of the character models in Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Which I don't know if that's because of the remastering specifically or what, but in terms of graphics, I thought it looked great. The one, and I guess this would fall under graphics, but the issue with New York that they face with the first game, some of like the major landmarks, they don't have the rights to. So One World Trade, the Freedom Tower, is different in this game than it is in real life. The Met is different. It's like some modern, it's kind of like MoMA instead of the Met. But the most egregious thing in this game, they didn't get the rights to the Chrysler building. It's in the first game. It's not in this one. The beautiful Chrysler building is replaced with like a blocky skyscraper. Chrysler building is like one of probably the iconic, next to the Empire State Building, New York landmark. And it's,
I don't simp for New York like the rest of the world. I don't give a shit.
I mean, I didn't notice. Like, I remember.
New York is definitely not a character in this game.
New York?
Yeah,
Really?
Are you kidding?
I mean, that's
not a character. It's a setting.
Okay. I mean,
Yeah,
New York is a pretty important setting for Spider-Man.
that's a big part of the fun of just kind of getting around in this game, is that sometimes you're passing real locations, and it's kind of cool. Like, I mean, I didn't notice the Chrysler building missing. I remember it being in the first one, but
I think that's why I'm so excited for that Blade game. If it's in Paris, I'm much more curious to do I'd rather do Spider-Man in Paris. That would be awesome.
This guy's a
that'd be cool
Paris
too.
simp.
No, I don't know that much about Paris. I'm more interested in seeing something new than a city I've seen a bajillion times in movies and games.
So going back to the character thing, I think they spend a lot of time on the suit models because the suits look incredible. Even I don't know, there's one Miles Morales suit with like a cape, and that cloth physics seems to work pretty well. I didn't notice any problems. I know there's like that noir Spider-Man, I think also has like a flowing coat type thing. I don't think I ever used that one, but I'm assuming they put the same type of care into that. Again, like it's crazy that you'll spend this much time doing all this cloth physics work, and then people will never even see this potentially. It seems crazy to me.
Well, just on that note, Andrew, that I thought the expansion of the map to Queens and Brooklyn, how much of that is people going to see? Like there are so many areas of this entire map. I'd be curious in like not someone who's like actively exploring everything, but someone who just plays the game as directed. What percentage of the map do you actually encounter? Because there's just so many areas
it's pretty spread out. I would think it's pretty spread out for the main story, but
the stuff, you obviously are limited by buildings to swing with, and I feel like maybe initially it was there to encourage wingsuit, but I don't remember much stuff happening in the new areas.
Well, except for kind of beginning and end, I think, right?
Yeah.
Also with
the incentive, because that's where Peter lives. I know in the first movie that's where he lives, basically, and
yeah.
With the wingsuit, I actually found I was spending a lot less time near the ground, and actually like kind of like Frank was saying, how New York's not a character. Like I felt in the first game it was more of a character because I was near the ground. I was seeing the buildings. I was seeing the people around on the street. And this one, I was doing mostly, airsuit across the top kind of thing. And I wasn't really down in the trenches. I wasn't ever really dropping down to the ground or swinging close to the street like I was before. And I did feel like I was more just like passing through the city to get to my next, mission or whatever I was going to find, rather than swinging through this like living, breathing space. But I thought they did a really incredible job with the tech. I know I think Frank was saying, nothing much stood out, but I don't know. I saw a lot of stuff that stood out in the city. Like right after that initial Sandman thing, there's sand everywhere. There's destroyed buildings. Those eventually seem to get repaired, I think. Hard to tell. But then there's also a lot of time of day shifts that happen in this game that I don't think happened very much in the other games that look really good. There's storms, destruction, and then there's what happens at the end, which kind of is a big environment change as well. So I thought they did a great job with the tech and like just again, the fast travel, being able to basically pick any point on the map and then say, go here. And it takes you to like a very nearby intersection and just kind of drop you there pretty much instantaneously is very impressive. So when I would do the fast travel, I wasn't trying to like look into the distance and see how much popping was happening, but me just playing the game, I didn't notice anything. It was just flawless. So I don't know how exactly they pulled that off, but it looked really good, and I was really impressed.
Yeah, so
that transition is the amazing thing, right? Like it's like you're swinging, and then all of a sudden you're just swinging again in a new place of the city. It's like
it took me a while to adjust. When you pick a spot, you'll see the cursor move, like it moves you to a spot always, right? It's never exactly where you pick.
But not very far away.
No, which is fine. I'll take the convenience versus exactly where I want to go. But once you get used to it, I agree. The fast travel, kind of like what we said about Ghost of Tsushima, is truly technically amazing. One thing
I'll just want to say on fast travel before you move on, Frank, host of Game Junk. I only used fast travel after the game was done to like do the final things. I really enjoy the swinging mechanic through the city. And to be honest, I would have loved to have done a little more walking. I would have loved to walk from mission to mission just to take in the city. But
you should do that on your next playthrough.
Yeah, like a walking only.
Yeah, there mission. You go. Who needs wings or webs?
Yeah.
There's a really good video from the first Spider-Man for PS4. It's like 2 minutes at most, and it shows how they started with a prototype of just swinging. Like you have to make sure swinging feels good, and how they iterated on it and built the game. So anyone who's interested in like game dev and how stuff gets prototyped should definitely check out that video. In terms of techgasms, it's not tech, more art. It's a really small thing. But the spider bot, when the kind of sphere of like distortion and that shows up to show you that one of those is around an area. I thought that looked incredible.
I thought you were gonna say the tiger.
Oh, that looked good too. But
Subdued.
that I don't know. There's like this iridescence and
It's like an oil. It's like an oil slick almost.
It looks amazing. And not this is even related, but if I can just talk about one little thing that I loved, one little thing that I hated, we have to get rid of any controls where you swipe on the touchpad. Like that swiping right to go to the camera and brutal. The worst.
I kept forgetting that. Like if I left the game for a bit and came back, I'd be like, how do you bring up the camera again? Or like the ASM thing or whatever it's called.
Yeah. And when you switch characters, like there's a bit of a delay when you do that stuff that I was like, did I do it right? It takes a second and not good. Almost a half-star penalty, but
You could also open the friendly neighborhood app thing through the start menu or the pause menu. So obviously they
pause.
Yeah. Did you guys run into any bugs? I ran into quite a few bugs, nothing crazy, but like Jay was talking about the things not showing up on the map. I found that I would run into cases where nothing would show up on the map except for the main story. And I was not at that part where it says, no point of no return or whatever. So, and in order to get rid of that bug, I would have to close the game completely and reload. But I also found a few times in some missions where checkpoints or doors I had to go into would just not activate. And luckily you can reload from the last checkpoint, and it was almost always like right there. So I have a feeling that got added, maybe not later, but I think they were glad they had that and probably had very aggressive checkpointing to make sure that if that did happen in game, that you could get out of it if they couldn't find all those bugs. Because it seemed like there was more. I mean, I had probably 10 to 15 of those where I had to restart a checkpoint in order to complete a mission. So it was definitely more common than I would have thought. And that was a little interesting that there were so many of those bugs.
I had definitely in the Wraith missions. I don't know if you remember. I was in a room where you have to scan for these clues for the cult. That's all the cult stuff. I had a lot of issues with those, and I had to restart I definitely had crashes where the game literally shut down. But I got stuck inside a building once. Like I got through a collision I shouldn't have been able to and had to shut the game down.
Well, I don't think I had any crashes or collision issues like that. Those are pretty major.
I had one where I had to restart the game, but I had a few that were the little side crime missions that I was doing. And on a couple of occasions, it wouldn't end, and I didn't know where the enemy was. At one point, one of them was in a wall. You could see the red outline. And another time it was one in a car that didn't exit the car. So I couldn't kill them in the car.
Yeah, I mean, these bugs, like, it's a little surprising. People like to pick on like Bethesda and games like that, which are obviously big open world games for being very buggy. This game's got some bugs. It's a little surprising, but definitely had a bunch of soft locks for me. A lot of kind of like things where you had to interact with something and you hit the button to interact, and then it just does it. You get locked in, but then whatever's supposed to happen next doesn't happen. And then, of course, the classic suits showing up as white cubes issue, which was
didn't it just look like a backpack or something?
Well, it was some of the suits worked, and then some of them were they looked almost invisible, but they were just like this small white cube. And then there was the bodega suit or whatever for Miles. He's got like a cat in his backpack, and for some reason the cat in the backpack was there, but Miles was not. So you could kind of play swinging around.
I mean, would it be at the same spot at the cube? It's probably the cube was there and the backpack was an attachment that was covering the cube.
I think so, yeah. So
I mean,
good stuff.
look, Fallout, when I played Fallout 4 when it came out, I fell through the world twice in my first 30 minutes. So I'm not even comparing the two.
Oh, that happened to me too. I fell through the world in this too. So
Yeah, right.
I fell through the world in this as well.
Yeah, right. All right. I think anything main game, core gameplay that anyone else wants to talk about before we move on to spoiler stuff? I think I've said everything I need to say.
No.
Couple of just real quick things. Like we were talking about the suits, and it kind of reminded me because Jay was talking about magic circle and the idea of like sometimes what you're doing.
Ernest Adams' Fundamentals of Game Design. Put it to the magic circle.
Right. So sometimes like what you're doing in like in particular in an open world game suddenly is not clicking with what's going on in the story of the game. And that happened with suits a little bit because there's times when when Peter has to be wearing the black suit because it's part of the story. But you could choose a different suit. But then when the cutscene plays, suddenly he's wearing the black suit. And like, I feel like there was a section where you couldn't change his suit. I don't, maybe I'm misremembering that, but there was something weird with that where it was like, felt a bit like they were fighting with, that element of the game.
I respected the story in those cases and just played in whatever suit was appropriate to what was happening in the moment.
Of course. And then I just wanted to go back to, we started off talking about the platinum thing, sent you guys a link to the site.
I got that too. I was
looking at. Now it says 71%, but when you hover over it, it says 17%. I don't know. Maybe it's 71% of people who use this site or something like that?
That's what I was saying before. On the official PlayStation app, it is a rare trophy, 17.8%.
So that makes a little more sense. But the trophy for beating the game is over 50%, which is
that Heal the World.
Yeah, which is kind of, I mean, I gotta assume that's kind of high for a big game like this.
Just a shout out on PlayStation Stars Rewards, an exclusive collectible for getting the Heal the World trophy. If you beat the game, get on there. I'm really pushing this PlayStation Stars now. I should say Blue Haze for me, wardrobe included, is fully engaged. I was buying PlayStation games, doing all. I'm so back on PlayStation. Got that PSVR 2 out today, ready to go.
Nice.
Just before we move on, one thing that I really enjoy in these kinds of games, if there were too many of them, it would be a problem, but I felt the balance was good with the missions where you're not really doing anything other than having a character moment with some gameplay elements. So the high school section where you're breaking into the flashback.
Like that's a story kind of thing, right?
Yeah, or Coney Island, or anything where you're just walking around an environment for a moment where it feels like, okay, this is not action related, it's character related, and it feels like I'm actually. That's why whenever I love games where you end up at a party and you have to walk around a party and find someone, and it just feels very lived in and alive. The book fair, going up to all of the different vendors. I noticed, Frank, I had mentioned that there was a contraception, a part in the game where they are talking about using contraception and handing out information about that. And you said you didn't remember it. Did you go to all the book fair stands?
No. Like, you mean when you get all the musical instruments, the museum opening after that?
No, that's I really liked that. Where
I don't remember the book fair at all, and I didn't go to any of them. The bare minimum.
You didn't go to you didn't forget the pamphlet on contraception.
Did not.
You didn't get the contraception trophy.
Trophy.
Yeah, I went to all of the stands, but I will say the music thing. I thought that was interesting, like bringing in. You don't have to do any of it, but bringing in the actual act of walking around a museum and learning about jazz musicians, I thought was a great way of incorporating the culture of New York City as a character.
I thought it was a bit of a snooze fest, but to each their own. It was kind of optional, so that's fine. The one side mission that was a bit like no action that is memorable to me is the guy with
Haley.
the pigeons, like where you had to. I think he dies at the end of it. Oops, spoiler. But I don't know. I think it's because it took place at night. It was just a very memorable mission.
Mine was during the day. I guess because I did it after the credits.
I didn't know there was. Yeah, maybe I'm misremembering. I'm pretty sure it was that night.
I found the Haley mission pretty interesting.
Oh, the spray paint? The spray paint.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
spray
pretty
paint one. And also just like the audio aspect of it, how everything's muffled. I found that a nice touch and pretty cool that they would, take the time to do that. So, and kind of related in terms of audio, I don't think anything in the score really like stood out to me as anything special, but I felt like there was a lot of really good sound effects in the game. But nothing in the score is memorable other than, that typical Spider-Man intro song.
Yeah, I like the main theme. Like that was in the first game. I think kind of like Uncharted and Sony AAA games are really good at actually coming up with a memorable theme, where other games I couldn't even hum 2 bars of their songs. So I did like that, but it's a good score in terms of accompanying action, but I don't remember anything about it. I would agree there. But
I felt like the Venom section had a pretty similar score to Spider-Man 3. I don't know if it was paying homage to that or not, but.
All right. Any other non-spoiler stuff to discuss? Do we give our star ratings pre-spoiler or after?
I think
Pre, I think.
Okay. Well, let's get into our star ratings for Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Out of 5, Jay, what do you got?
I'll give it a 5. I mean, it was a
Platinum.
beautiful
How
experience.
could
I had a lot of fun with it. No one mentioned the basketball with Harry with the shins playing Garden State style. Really captured that mid 2000s sort of indie feel. But yeah, a lot of fun.
It wasn't the mid 2000s when you shoot the basketballs.
What?
It
No, I'm
wasn't.
talking about like that era of movie making.
Okay. All right.
Hey, you asked.
Yeah, I feel
You
like
didn't ask, but
I feel like
said.
you thought that was part of the flashback when you shot the basketballs, when it's present day when you shoot the basketballs.
No, I was saying like a flashback to movies like Garden State, 500 Days of Summer, all of the classics from that period in time.
Sean.
It's a first party Sony game. I have to give it 5 stars. Just a given.
The Blue Haze.
Andrew?
It's going to be 5 for me as well. I really enjoyed it. 5 so far. Frank, you got to break the tie here.
The Blue Haze, Frank.
I gotta say, coming into this, I was a 4.5. But talking about it has made me appreciate it a lot more. And I think the fact that it's the third game.
You're caving?
No, I'm at a 4.75.
Oh, jeez.
And I don't know which way to go. I either got to go up or down.
Yeah, you do.
But you don't want to be less Blue Haze than us. So I think you got to go up.
That would be embarrassing.
But a true Blue Haze knows this is not pinnacle Blue Haze. This is kind of mid Blue Haze. I think I'm giving it a 4.5.
Oh.
The fact that on October 20th, I started it and didn't come back to it till December 20th, that has to speak something to the game. 4.5. There's any other first-person PlayStation game, I play it until it's done.
It was the video game equivalent of Barbenheimer, man. Like, what are you going to do? Like, there's too many games coming out.
Yeah, and neither of those games compelled me to finish them. So it's like Barbenheimer. They're both 4.5s. All right, let's get into spoiler discussion for Marvel Spider-Man 2. Sean, why don't you kickstart us with your feelings on the story or spoiler elements?
Sure, I would be happy to do that. I thought, they kind of put their own spin on Venom in this game, obviously, and I really liked what they did with it. Like the idea that Harry starts off the one who has the symbiote suit and is kind of like it heals him, and that's an interesting element of the story. And then he kind of is almost becoming a superhero himself. Then Peter takes the suit over, and obviously, that's going to go not so well. But then, it kind of goes back the other way again. And, then you kind of get Venom proper as a villain. I thought all that stuff worked really well. And, again, like Jay was kind of hinting at, there's some good character stuff in the game. So, the relationships between Peter, Mary Jane, Harry, all that stuff is fleshed out enough that you kind of care when these things come to a head. And, yeah.
Well, one thing with that I loved the idea and the look of, but it was it didn't really have much consequence story-wise, except for like a small fight is it Scream, the character that Mary Jane becomes when the suit attaches to her?
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I like that as well.
It only lasted for 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Short.
I thought it was going to be a big change in the game, and it's like over and done with really quickly. But it still looked cool, and I didn't expect it.
And
I wasn't
where
sure
the
if
fight happens is cool too. Rather than in a warehouse, in a lab, it's just in Queens, in the suburbs, basically.
Yeah, and that was where I wasn't sure if that character was unique to the game, but it looks like it is from the comics. But yeah, I really like the look of it.
I really like the idea of the city being taken over by the symbiote and the citizens becoming
No, dude, you got to play the Arkham series. If you like the combat in this game, every idea you're talking about was in that series first.
I downloaded those games for my kids to play because they crushed Spider-Man 2. So in my household, 3 people have beaten Spider-Man 2 in the same period of time. Like we've been gaming over here. And
I thought about this earlier in the show. Rocksteady, everyone's shitting on everything you do. IGN releases an article. We played the Suicide Squad and we didn't like it. Like, what kind of bullshit is that? They never give their opinions of previews in headlines ever. They kind of give such no, this is like going back through game journalism forever. So now, like, it's one of those cases where it's a pleasure to shit on Rocksteady. Rocksteady, you want to win everyone back? Just remake Arkham Asylum with current tech. People will lose their minds.
Mm-hmm.
Easy win.
But yeah, the variety of villains I liked, having the cultists and Craven's people and the symbiote people.
I guess I found the enemies, now that you mention it, a little generic. I didn't really know if I was fighting a cultist versus a Craven hunter. I didn't like the flying drones for Craven or the dogs necessarily. I mean, they're fine for pacing, but visually, I didn't really get off on the enemies I was fighting, but that rarely happens in a game.
You didn't do a force pull to those images?
No force pull. Now, I do force pulls to the enemies in Jedi Survivor. Like every creature, like all those enemies are awesome.
Well, I thought because the first game, I don't remember there being too much variety in the enemies. It seemed like it was more thugs, you know? So it just felt a little like there's a little more variety. But when you have such a big threat, kind of to what Sean was saying about the suits not always lining up to the story, it is weird having the entire city full of these black, branches of symbiote goo, and you're still like looking for spider bots and and it's not something, I guess, that you kind of have to suspend your disbelief a little bit, but Even at the point where I really like the anti-venom thing. When you become anti-venom, eventually you switch back to your regular outfit, but whenever you engage in your special powers by clicking both of the thumbsticks, you transform back to the anti-venom suit automatically. But outside of that, you're still Spider-Man in your Spider-Man suit, but you have the white symbiote tendrils.
I think you can swap those powers. There's a few powers for both character where there's multiple options for the L1 face buttons, and you can
the spider iron spider suit. That's the other.
I forgot about anti-venom. That was really strong, visually and gameplay wise.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like as soon as that engaged, it felt nice having a power boost that actually felt like you were powerful. Like when you were in the black suit as not Venom, but like leading towards Venom. The noticeable difference in how your combat with enemies increased, your power increased. I just felt like it was satisfying from a gameplay perspective, but also from the story perspective. You know, like when the character is swinging around talking about how powerful they feel and how good they feel, and I'm like, I feel powerful and good too, dude. I'm in the game.
You don't want to give it up, right? Like when he's got the black suit and stuff, so you can kind of feel it.
I mean, some of the voice acting with Peter when he's in like the dark mode, he's like, gotta get across the city, save Mary Jane.
I always gotta save everyone.
But then going back and forth between that and Miles Morales, I felt like that's where you could really feel the difference in the combat. And eventually, as from a story point, Miles fighting Peter, I thought worked well. And I really like the idea of Harry becoming Venom. I think it's a shift that was a good move for this game, rather than introducing what's his name, Eddie Brock.
Eddie Brock. Speaking of feeling powerful, the best part of this game, hands down for me, was playing as Venom, where the combat switches up drastically. It's the camera changes. It's this big hulking character you're playing as, and visually, that was the best looking thing in the game by far to me. That sequence looked so good. I was like, nothing in this game is going to look better than the balloons. But then we get the Venom sequence, and it just blew my mind.
Yeah, you're busting through all those walls and jumping up the platforms and everything. Yeah, it's really, really cool. And
I wish you could displace the balloons. Like, it would have been nice if there was something where you had to like unlodge a balloon and it floats up and
blow into a microphone to have it drift across.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah. The interesting thing with Venom too is like, obviously it's one scene in the game, and it's kind of like leaves you wanting more. And, you know, Insomniac leaks, apparently there is a Venom spinoff in the works. I don't know if that'll change now or
a spoiler,
but I guess so.
Meta spoiler.
Like, we're spoiling the real world now. We gotta
real world spoilers. But I think that is intriguing. That definitely could be fun.
One thing about Peter Parker is that what I didn't like about this game is, like, I feel Peter Parker as a character in Spider-Man is supposed to be like a nerdy but lovable tech scientist guy. And I felt like in this game, he was just a giant loser. He couldn't do anything right. He didn't even come across as smart. I don't know, like when they're in the May Foundation and Harry has his powers kind of the first time and they start like wrecking the whole place. He's just like, yeah, man, let's wreck the whole thing. Like, you know, he's not like, oh, let's try to figure this out. I don't know. It just seemed weird for his character, like from my perspective. And
Yeah, he
I
does
never
come across
really,
as a bit of a weenie.
yeah, total weenie. Exactly. Perfect name.
What is
Weenie
this? It's a
Parker.
weenie roast?
Yeah, it's a weenie roast. Unbelievable, this guy. But I don't know. I didn't like it. Even like the flashbacks at the beginning with May, she's basically saying like, "You're a giant weenie. You got to stand up for yourselves." And he's like, "Yeah, you're right. I'm gonna draw a face on this wall." Like, okay, that doesn't make you not a weenie by drawing that face on the wall.
Yeah, throw the
But-
bananas in the garbage.
Yeah, so I don't know. I had a little trouble. Even like since they switched the character, it's felt weird. The character model, I should say, for Peter Parker.
I prefer the old one a lot.
Yeah, it felt super weird. I don't know why they did that.
That wasn't in the leak. We didn't get the true answer to the character change yet.
Not sure.
Wasn't it to pull it closer to what's his face, Tom Arnold?
Tom Holland, maybe.
I feel like the old one looked more like Tom Holland.
Yeah.
Hey, look, something's up there. I don't know what it is. I don't know if we'll ever know.
But on the character model thing, I thought Miles looked really good.
Oh yeah, Miles looks way better than
Yeah.
I think that character is better overall.
Mhm.
I don't know if I'm kind of biased because I had so much fun with the short Miles Morales experience, but yeah, I greatly prefer that character in this game.
It's pretty amazing that they, and when I say they, I don't know who exactly I'm referring to, but the creation of Miles Morales as a second Spider-Man and how that has become such a kind of defining character in the games, in the films. It just feels like they really accomplished adding a new character to a story that people don't seem to hate, or at least for not any good reason.
I think it's because the products like that character is associated with are tremendous, whether it's the movies or the games. It's like, yeah, it's like if you make that content amazing, people are going to love it. So that was a huge success for sure.
Are they going to do a Spider-Verse game? Because when you get those suits and you're swinging around with that animation style, it feels like they're a couple steps away from being able to do something.
Yeah. Surprised they haven't done a Spider-Verse spinoff. Was that in the leak, Sean?
No, it's not in the leak. I was thinking that too. I mean, I don't know. Maybe like they've obviously been kind of building out their own universe now. So I don't know if that would be kind of like you'd have to separate it and it'd be its own standalone thing probably. But that would be cool. Yeah, I'd like to see that. I just looked up why they changed the face model. Apparently it was the old face did not animate well with the motion capture for the actor that they're using in this game. I don't know if that
Can you believe that
makes a lot of sense, but that's what they said. It was for animation reasons.
He was too ugly. Too ugly.
Dude, he wasn't a big enough of a weenie.
That's right. Needed more weenie face. Should have called
I
me.
have obviously haven't played a ton of video games compared to like the ultimate gamers on this Game Junk podcast, but I do feel like this series captures the feeling of being a superhero, at least Spider-Man specifically, because there's the element of swinging around and getting into fights and everything, but there's also that element of balancing his regular life, I guess. And all of those, gameplay asides or mechanics aside, the side missions that are really like the traditional, like friendly neighborhood Spider-Man side missions, I think really give you that sense that you're a character that's kind of looking over the city a little bit. But again, from a story perspective, when you're swinging through the city and you see that red triangle with the exclamation mark pop up and it says, multiple people dying in a fire, and then you just keep swinging to get your spider bot, it goes against it a little bit. But I do feel like it is from my very limited experience, capturing what it might feel like to be a superhero.
Totally.
Definitely. I mean, there've been some good Spider-Man games in the past. I remember Spider-Man 2 for, I don't know, what was it, Xbox at the time or PS2?
PlayStation.
Yeah, that was pretty good. That was the first one where they really got the traversal down.
I thought the first PlayStation Spider-Man game for PS1
That was good too. Yeah.
I didn't play it. I didn't play any of those early superhero games, but I remember people really liking that game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Couple other story points I kind of was struggling with, and that's like, so Craven comes to New York to hunt for the ultimate whatever
Yes.
hunter or whatever, and he like doesn't even consider Spider-Man. Like he goes after like Scorpion and Doctor Octopus and all these other ones, but he doesn't like think of Spider-Man. There's even like a scene I think where he's like looking at Spider-Man. He's like, "Oh yeah, look at that guy," and then he just like lets him go, like no big deal.
I'm
Like,
so glad you brought this up. Also, like, so the way you hunt him is to get 20 of your minions to beat him up or to make yourself immune to poison for Scorpion before you kill him. Like he is a weenie. He doesn't even fight the people straight up. Like you're Craven the Hunter. Like, how is there not a big sequence where it's you versus him in like a almost Metal Gear Solid 3 sniper boss fight or something where you're in an environment and you don't know where he is? Like the Craven thing is a wet noodle for me. It just the fulfillment of that character as a hunter, the boss fight wasn't that great. I feel like that is like he does not feel like a hunter at all.
Yeah, feels like a Viking or something.
I'm trying to remember how it all plays out. Like the whole thing is that does he come in knowing about the symbiote, or does that only come up partway through?
I thought he went there because of Spider-Man.
No,
Yeah.
I don't think that is the case. I think it was just that it's New York and there's a lot of bad guys in New York.
Like he gets some alert. It's like the first cutscene. He gets some alert in the jungle. I don't remember what it was.
Yeah, it's his minion being like, "Hey, boss, check out this New York place," and then he's like, "Oh, let's go."
Like the way it plays out, I feel like it kind of feels like the symbiote is the ultimate goal. I don't know if like that totally holds up through everything that's said in the opening parts. Like that's almost like a twist that gets revealed in a way where it's like you think he's there for Spider-Man, but he knows that the symbiote's actually more powerful.
Craven should have got the symbiote suit to become the ultimate hunter, and you got to fight him.
I think he only became aware of the symbiote when Peter Parker had it on him, and he was fighting that like halfway through the game or whatever, and then he like knocks Craven out when Miles is trying to take the suit off him, I think, and then that's when Craven's like, "Okay, now that is the like ultimate thing or whatever." And then he captures them. And
with story stuff and nitpicks, I just have to say, 90% of video game stories are absolute ass, and this is one of the better ones. So even when I criticize it, I feel bad because at least I'm engaged and had awesome moments in the cutscenes where I'm so not interested in most of the cutscenes I watch in games. So they should get some kudos for that for sure, right, Jay?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I did like and I guess maybe they were taking the lead that, what was the last Spider-Man Far From Home? Or no, Spider-Man, the last one, which deals with some of the villains in a way that's like empathetic towards them or sympathetic towards them. It's the same thing with this, where you get to see like the Tombstone thing where he's working the go-karts at Coney Island, and what is the guy that's like he's in the first one,
Lizard or Scorpion,
or he's in Miles Morales, maybe the inverted
Mr. Negative.
Mr. Negative, yeah. And of course Sandman. I think it does a good job at humanizing some of the villains as far as you can in a game. And even the build up towards Norman Osborn likely heading towards being Green Goblin because of what happened to Harry. I think it's a good way to lead towards that.
I love the look of the fully formed lizard. I can't remember if Lizard looked like that in the first game or
Yeah,
not.
looked awesome.
That sequence is really good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just quickly going back to Craven, I did like how he appears so often in the game, though. A lot of times in games, they'll like introduce you to the big bad enemy, and then you play the whole game and you don't really see them or hear from them, and then all of a sudden the game ends and you're now fighting him in the final boss fight. And I like that, you had multiple occurrences where you ran into this guy, you had little fights or whatever, or you're fighting around him. And I felt like it at least made it familiar that he was the enemy until Venom comes, obviously. But I like that they didn't just like introduce Craven and you're fighting a bunch of his hunters and then you fight him and that's it. I like that there was more than just that. And I thought the fight with Venom and him was actually pretty fun at the end. 'Cause wasn't he was that the part where he was going kind of invisible? Am I remember that correctly? Or was that the other one when he was fighting Spider-Man? I don't know. It's kind of blurring together now. Or maybe that wasn't even in this
I
game.
don't remember that specifically. Like I think both Peter and Miles are involved, right, in the final Venom fight. There's like
Final
some
Venom.
stuff with Peter.
Yes.
and-
Yeah, sorry, I was talking about Venom versus Craven, though.
Oh, okay.
I did like the Venom fight with the football field that's raised into the air and broken into 3 pieces, and the way it encourages you to swing from piece to piece, and the little the hanging police car and the anything that could create a noise that you can trigger to slow the Venom down.
Yeah, that was cool.
I'm glad you mentioned the final boss fight because the climax of the movie, it's really good at Spider-Man, Miles Morales, and Mary Jane all like cutting between them to defeat the final boss, including, thank God I got to bring this up, taking Mary Jane's stealth sequence and basically turning it into a third-person shooter. And of course, any game that has shooting and good shooting mechanics all of a sudden becomes so much more compelling to the point where I would play a third person shooter Mary Jane game. Like it was that good. So if you're ever struggling for an idea or a sequence that you don't know what to do, just turn it into a shooter. People will like it. Yep.
Yeah, it's true.
The one thing we haven't touched on character wise is the introduction of Carnage, which is obviously going to be probably in the next game as well, which is the Flame Cult or whatever they were called. Leader turns into
that
Carnage.
relates to Carnage.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Is that true?
I don't know that. Spoiler again.
No, it was in the game. They showed him. They showed him with the red symbiote. He steals it. Jay, am I crazy? Did that not happen in the game?
I assumed it was leading to Carnage as well.
Yeah, and even his last speech is like, "I bring the carnage," or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they have like he's got one of those Osborn capsules with the symbiote, and it's red in there.
No, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying I didn't know.
You didn't pick up on that?
No.
Whoa.
I didn't finish that whole side quest thing, so I don't know. But it does say that in the comics, Cletus Cassidy was never the leader of a cult called the Flame, but he did become the head of a cult. So it's possible that that would connect.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that Marvel let them kind of change the storyline so much for these characters. Like, I don't know, when Harry first had the symbiote on him, I was like, whoa, what's happening here? Because this is not how the comic books go at all. I was kind of shocked. Like working with licensed products, they don't usually let you have such, free reign to do whatever you want and kind of rewrite the stories based on their IP. So I was kind of shocked actually that
I guess the
they would change
multiverse
it.
kind of thing maybe allowed
Maybe.
that a little bit, because I know the Spider-Man games are referred to as is it the Gamerverse or the Gameverse?
I'm not sure.
For
The
example,
Insomniac verse.
the action figures that they've released connected to these games are specifically called Gamerverse
Yes, Earth
figures.
Earth 1048, also known as the Gamerverse or Insomniac's Marvel Universe.
So in that regard, I could see how it's like, okay, we can have a whole line of toys and whatever else that's connected specifically to this.
Merchandise.
Yeah. But
what-
they've done a great job at I think, changing just enough and giving it its own sort of identity that it doesn't feel like it's not worth, stepping away from the main story.
I can't remember. Did anything with the games appear in the second Spider-Verse movie? Or the first?
I think so.
I'm surprised if it didn't. Seems a little strange.
Yeah.
Maybe the suit was the Spider-Man Gamerverse suit with the white spider in it. I seem to remember there being something.
Yeah, I think
But-
when they have all the different suits in those
Mhm.
cases or whatever they are, I think one of them was the Insomniac suit.
I mean, how could you put one of the characters in if their face is going to change in the next game? You can't do it. I don't know if this performance capture actor, if their face is going to hold up to next gen motion capping mocap technology. They might need to change it again.
They probably will.
Why even try? Just quit.
Something
Just quit.
is up with that.
Is there a suit that you guys found yourself like, it's nice to try these out, but I like this suit, playing in this suit?
Not this time. I usually stick to the classic suit. And in the last Spider-Man game, I tended to use the cartoon ones because I just liked the way they looked. But I was experimenting beginning to end in this game. And I like the white suit, the look of the white suit sometimes.
Yeah, I favored that one at the end.
I love the classic suit or the updated classic suit. They all look really solid.
Sean, what's your go-to suit?
What did I use the most? Probably Spider Punk, because I'm a punk rocker. But
I thought you were going to say invisible with the cat backpack, but
that was good. Yeah, I use Spider-Man 2099 a lot as well. Like, I guess a lot of the Spider-Verse related ones, which kind of, I guess, break the immersion of the game but they're fun. But I did
Bodega
like just
Cat,
the original one.
that's, it's New York as a character. Having an actual Bodega Cat suit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The Miles Morales, I think the one you get after you do that whole jazz storyline, that one was pretty cool.
The swingers,
Yeah.
like a Cherry Poppin' Daddy's suit.
Yeah.
Was there in the first one an animated suit?
yeah,
I wish that was in this one as well.
the noir suit's kind of like that.
I think they do
But
have
I mean, like,
a Spider-Verse.
not Spider-Verse, but I mean,
Oh,
Like just a cell
Like,
shaded kind of cartoon.
like the 60s Spider-Man cartoon? Or?
yeah, or the 90s one or something.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah, it was pretty fun unlocking all of those looks. Some of them are better than others, but wasn't crazy about the Vulture style Craven suit, but
They can't all be winners, Jay.
it's true.
All right. Well, I think we've officially tapped all there is to say about Marvel Spider-Man 2. Any thoughts or commentary that people need to get out before we wrap this up?
No, I mean, I guess one thing about the ending, like Jay was mentioning, that Green Goblin seems to be coming up potentially for Spider-Man 3. And I think there's a character that's mentioned that is that Silk character, which might be in the next game. I wasn't sure what was going on with Doc Ock. Did anybody have any thoughts on that? Like at first when Norman Osborn was going to talk to him, I thought it was going to be like a Sinister Six thing where he's going around and recruiting everyone. But then Doc Ock was kind of like going against him almost. I didn't really get what was happening there.
He'll probably be back for the next one.
The only thing I got from that was that they were trying to do like a Silence of the Lambs kind of thing.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun. It was great. I'm not finished talking yet. I will say I think the variety both of the gameplay and the characters is great. The way in which they've incorporated, some of the different, like thinking of New York as a character, being a boiling pot, and, so many different types of, so many cultures, so many people living in that city. I think it created the perfect environment to explore characters that are outside of just the Peter Parker and Mary Jane mode. And I think they did it pretty successfully. There's some moments where it feels a little forced, but generally I think it's, if game companies or storytellers are looking for a way to kind of diversify their characters and, their storytelling, I thought this was a pretty good job at doing that. So kudos.
Kudos all around. Lots of kudos.
Frank, were you disappointed that there was only one DJ Miles section in the game, or what?
I was.
Well, I think I talked to Sean about this. I didn't think that part was. I liked it, but I couldn't help but compare it to the rhythm game in Final Fantasy VII Remake, which I thought was way better. But I still liked it.
I mean, as a rhythm game, it wasn't great, but it was fun. The last question I got to ask: will Peter Parker be back in the next game?
Yeah, that's a big thing that we didn't touch on. The idea of him stepping back. It didn't seem permanent. It seemed like, okay, I'll handle the city for a while you live your life for a moment. Yeah. But, I think that, it makes sense that that's where they would be going. And I think the Miles character is strong enough to be able to make that transition. Because it did still feel like Spider-Man was the lead character in this. But having Miles step up and then Spider-Man, Peter Parker's Spider-Man, be the secondary character, I think would make sense.
Maybe he's just the one calling in on his phone all the time.
Yeah.
Frank, it's kind of like what he did in Miles Morales.
Yeah. Frank, were you annoyed by the after you finish a fight with Miles and you go up to do the celebratory gesture, the pointing Spider-Man meme?
No, that's been in other versions of the game too.
Oh.
You thought I'd be annoyed?
I don't know. I don't know anymore.
Okay. I could see Peter Parker. They frame it as a Miles Morales game. Peter Parker gets turned into a villain somehow. You fight him and then
again,
all of them later. Yeah, like a legit different villain this time. Or it's a story element, and then you get to play it like he needs to sit. It gets flipped, and then you need to save Miles Morales, and you get like a small section where you play as, or they hold him hostage to get to Miles Morales. He'll be in the game for sure. I don't know if he'll be the main character.
So I would like to see more J. Jonah Jameson, like missions connected to that. I know Peter isn't taking pictures for him anymore, but also taking inspiration from the films. It'd be interesting if one of the two, like maybe Peter, is outed as Spider-Man, but Miles is still the mysterious other Spider-Man. There could be some interesting drama there.
I mean, Miles is pretty open with who he tells about the Spider-Man stuff. So
Yeah, he's a little loose lips,
yeah,
sink ships, Miles.
careful, Miles.
We didn't talk about one of the best parts, the swinging ragdoll when you got the people on your back and they're just like flailing like dead monkeys on your back.
Oh, yeah,
Jay
there's a
Jonah
few
goes for a
missions.
ride.
Yeah.
I was surprised they added that, but it was a fun little
The
fun little
costume, the bear costume that was
thing. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
mascot.
Yeah, the mascot. Yeah. Frank looks confused, like he didn't do anything.
I'm trying to remember.
Did you even play the game,
know.
Frank?
Yes, I didn't. I don't remember anything weird about the physics. I was just like, okay, get this body to the point as soon as I can.
It just looked a little goofy at times, but
All right,
that's all.
I'm calling it. We've officially tapped. Jay, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. Anything you want to promote or get your big socials out there?
Well, I mean, I'll just promote the Film Junk podcast.
Filmjunk.com/Patreon for exclusive content.
Patreon.com/
What did I say? Filmjunk.com. Look, we're tapped. I'm tapped. You can watch this on YouTube at youtube.com/GameJunk. Thank you for listening or watching. We'll see you in a while. This is evergreen content. You can watch this review anytime you beat Spider-Man. And to anyone who platinums it, if you're one of the 17 or 71%,
17.8%.
congratulations. Bye-bye.